Now let's talk about Sri Lanka. It's finally getting that bailout. The International Monetary Fund has made the announcement Colombo will get $3 billion. It has taken nearly 1 year and Sri Lanka has gone through hell. The country defaulted on its debts. Its reserves were dangerously low. There was runaway inflation, seemingly endless blackouts, acute shortage of essentials and long lines for fuel. It led to the ouster of the powerful Rajapaksas. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to flee the country. Protesters took over his official residence, that's the president's house. Then a change of guard took place, and assistance from India helped in stabilizing the island. There is some semblance of order now, but Sri Lanka is not out of the woods yet, far from it. First, let's tell you about the bailout. The IMF has approved a $3 billion loan program. It will run for 3 years. Sri Lanka will get $333 million. This is the first tranche of funds, $333 million. It will be transferred in the next few days, and the rest of the money will follow over the course of 3 years. In all, it will be disbursed in 9 tranches. The current president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, shared the good news. He said that Sri Lanka is no longer a bankrupt country.
Sri Lanka බංකොලොත් රටක් හැටියට
Sri Lanka is no longer a bankrupt nation. Therefore, we can restart normal transactions. As our foreign exchange situation improves, we'll gradually roll back import restrictions. Essential goods, medicine, and things needed for the tourist industry will be in the first round.
ක්‍රමානුකූලව ඉවත් කරන්නට යනවා.
But the loan comes with strings attached. Colombo had to agree to a slew of changes for this bailout. This is what Sri Lanka will have to do: increase its tax base, slash subsidies on imported goods, and reduce corruption. And Colombo has no option but to do all of this. The disbursement of the IMF loan is tied to these steps. And the IMF will conduct a review every 6 months. It has spelled out its expectations quite clearly.
This is a very ambitious program. It's clearly very ambitious, and implementation will be key. The one factor here is that there is broad recognition across the political spectrum of the need for reforms given the situation in economic situation in Sri Lanka. So that gives us belief that that there will be progress made on these reforms, and the government will deliver on the remaining reforms.
But the money from the IMF will not be enough. Sri Lanka will have to raise more funds to stabilize its economy. And where will that money come from? Colombo is working on some plans. It wants to restructure state-owned enterprises. It wants to privatize Sri Lankan Airlines, which is their national carrier. There's also an urgent need to restructure debts, and that is the immediate challenge. Sri Lanka has to present a restructuring strategy, which means reworking the terms of national debt, the monthly payments, and the interest rates. All of it has to be reworked. As of December 2022, Sri Lanka owed $84 billion. This is Colombo's total outstanding public debt, $84 billion. Some of those payments are due already. Sri Lanka has to pay $2 billion. This money is due to multilateral lenders in the first half of this year, $2 billion. But repaying debts is the last thing that Colombo wants to do right now. It is looking for a 10-year moratorium, a 10-year exemption on all foreign debt. It's a tall ask. Sri Lanka will have to convince all its lenders. And the most problematic one will be China. On that front, Colombo is already struggling. There's a sharp focus on Chinese loans. Do you know how much money Sri Lanka owes to China? As of December 2022, Beijing was owed $7.4 billion. That's almost 20% of Sri Lanka's total public debt. And what about loan waivers? Well, Beijing is a shark. It has been non-committal on waiving loans. In fact, Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister Ali Sabri was asked about this. He was asked if China would consider writing off some loans. I have his response. This is what he said. We have the will to pay, but we don't have the capacity to pay. What we are now trying to do is get that capacity back. That's going to be a very difficult and serious discussion. He said it. It's going to be difficult. And dealing with lenders like China is just one part of the Lankan government's challenge. It also has to win back the confidence of its people. Recent days have seen fresh protests. 5 days ago, unions in Sri Lanka went on a strike. Workers from hospitals, schools, and the railways protested. They wanted a wage hike. The government passed an order banning all strikes. It made such protests illegal. The order was controversial, to say the least. The government got a lot of flack for it. President Wickremesinghe now faces a dual test, reviving the economy while keeping his country together. Meanwhile, America's banking crisis is still hurting the world. 2 American banks failed earlier this month, and this is the fallout. America's biggest banks have taken a hit. The big 4 banks lost $52 billion. Global markets suffered losses too. This month, they've lost as much as $1 trillion. A major bank in Europe has been sold. Credit Suisse is being bought by rival UBS. The deal was engineered by the Swiss government. Now, the world often talks about America's military firepower and how lethal its weapons can be. But US banks can be just as lethal. In 2008, remember, they triggered a global financial crisis, and now they've caused yet another meltdown. The worst might be yet to come. A new report says that as many as 186 banks in the US could be in trouble. 186 banks. This is the finding of a study done by 4 American economists. They say more than 180 banks could, quote unquote, go the way of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB, is based in San Francisco. It's where the entire crisis began. It was the first American bank to collapse. It had run out of money. The bank did not have enough money to pay its depositors. Now imagine the same happening to 186 banks. Apparently, they have the same problems, a high level of uninsured deposits and a significant drop of government bonds. We've told you about this before. These banks bought government securities, government bonds. They're considered a safe bet, a good investment. So the money that people deposit in banks was parked in these bonds. But soon the value of these bonds declined. That's because America's central bank, the US Federal Reserve, jacked up interest rates. It brought new bonds into the market, and they offered better interest rates. So the old bonds became worthless. They lost their value. And the banks which are under pressure still hold a sizable number of the old bonds. SVB dumped its bonds at a loss. It had no other option. It had to pay the depositors. The bank lost almost $2 billion in that transaction. Ultimately, it collapsed. What happens if the same story repeats at 186 banks? Needless to say, the losses will be massive. In fact, I have a copy of the study with me. Listen to what it says. Even if only half of uninsured depositors decide to withdraw, almost 190 banks are at a potential risk of impairment to even insured depositors, with potentially $300 billion of insured deposits at risk. If uninsured deposit withdrawals even cause even small fire sales, substantially more banks are at risk. So $300 billion would be at risk, and it may have a ripple effect. That's what the study is saying. Already one more American bank is teetering. It's called First Republic. Its stock has been losing value. In 2 weeks, it has slumped by 90%. A few days ago, 11 banks stepped in to save First Republic. They injected $30 billion in cash. It was supposed to be a lifeline, but it hasn't helped. The cash infusion could not calm investors. The value of the stock is still falling. Wall Street CEOs are in a huddle, trying to come up with a new plan. If other banks are at risk, 180 others, like this report says, it wouldn't take a lot of time for the crisis to spread to other markets. This, remember, is a worst-case scenario. We can only hope it doesn't come to this. And we have some good news from Kashmir. A region which suffered decades of terrorism is finally enjoying the fruits of peace. Investors are turning to Kashmir. This was unimaginable just a few years ago. Today, Kashmir is a tourist hotspot, and it's attracting foreign investment. Dubai's Emaar group will invest a total of 500 crore rupees. This includes a mega mall project and IT towers to be set up in Jammu and Srinagar. It's significant, A, because of the money and development that will follow, and B, because this is a vote of confidence from an Arab nation for India's vision of Kashmir. So how did a terror-infested valley become an investor destination? Our next report tells you.
अनुच्छेद 370 के सभी खंड लागू नहीं होंगे सिवाय खंड 1 के.
It was August 2019. The government of India revoked Jammu and Kashmir's special status by abrogating Article 370. Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh were made 2 separate union territories governed by the Indian government. And with this move, the story of Kashmir changed forever. Today, Kashmir is attracting global investors. The first big player is the United Arab Emirates. A group called Emaar is turning to Kashmir. This is the same group that built the Burj Khalifa. Now, Emaar is making a $60 million investment in Kashmir. That's close to 500 crore rupees. They will build a shopping mall and an IT tower in Srinagar. Construction is expected to be completed by 2026. Kashmir's administration says this is the first FDI investment in the region. The mall will be spread over an area of 1 million square feet. It is expected to generate 7,000 to 8,000 jobs. The mall will have more than 500 shops, most of which will be operated by UAE-based companies. And this investment has not come out of the blue. Some structural changes have been made to Jammu and Kashmir. After the abrogation of Article 370, the Union Territory became subject to 890 central laws. Around 250 state laws have been eliminated and another 130 have been amended. In 2021, Jammu and Kashmir administration announced a new industrial development scheme. This is worth more than 28,400 crore rupees. The goal is simple: to encourage investment and take industrial development to the block level. In the same year, investments started pouring in. Kashmir attracted investments worth $2.5 billion in 2021. Last year, the figure shot up to more than $15 billion. And in the last 2 years, Jammu and Kashmir has received investment proposals from more than 5,000 companies. The UAE is one country that is very upbeat about investing in Kashmir. In January last year, it agreed to deliver projects worth over $1 billion in the valley. These include the development of industrial parks, a medical college, a specialty hospital, logistics centers, IT and multi-purpose towers. Remember, this is an Islamic nation investing in India's vision of Kashmir. It's a huge vote of confidence for the government and a setback to the Pakistanis. Investor confidence in Kashmir is a direct fallout of the improved security situation there. Kashmir is now relatively safe. 16 million tourists flocked to the valley last year, and now the UAE's big investment will have a domino effect. Emaar CEO Amit Jain said the investors should take a cue from the Emirati group. He said, and I quote, "This is the start. We should inspire people. People should aspire to follow us." Not very long ago, Kashmir was a region which made news for terror attacks and stone pelting. Today it is in the headlines as a destination for investors. It's a win for India.